The cold air bit at Alan's cheeks as he stood outside the university auditorium, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. His breath came in nervous puffs as he stared at the glass doors, knowing that beyond them was the person he had wronged years ago. The person whose future he had nearly ruined. The person he had been too ashamed to face until now. Sophia Carter. Alan had been her professor, a once-respected figure in the psychology department, known for his rigorous standards and no-nonsense attitude. Sophia had been one of his brightest students, sharp, insightful, and passionate. But Alan had allowed his own personal bias to cloud his judgment. He had seen something in her that he resented, something that reminded him too much of his own failures, his own insecurities. So, when Sophia had handed in her final thesis, an excellent piece of work, Alan had done the unthinkable. He failed her. He had justified it to himself at the time, nitpicking her work, finding small flaws and exaggerating them until they seemed like valid reasons to deny her the grade she had earned. It wasn't because her work was lacking, far from it. It was because she had excelled where he had stumbled in his own academic career, and he had let his jealousy twist his actions. Sophia had been devastated. That failed grade had cost her a prestigious internship and, ultimately, set her career back years. Alan had watched from the sidelines as her academic prospects dimmed, knowing all along that it was his fault. But he had been too proud to admit it. Too proud to acknowledge that his own failures had driven him to sabotage a student's future. Years had passed since then, and Alan had moved on with his career, climbing the academic ladder and earning accolades for his research. But the guilt never left him. The memory of what he had done to Sophia haunted him, especially as he saw other former students of his go on to flourish, their success casting a dark shadow over his own. He had stolen that from her. He had been the one to put up the barrier she couldn't overcome. And now, after all these years, he had decided to come clean. Through old colleagues, Alan had learned that Sophia had finally rebuilt her career, though it had taken her much longer than it should have. She was a rising star in the field of clinical psychology, gaining recognition for her groundbreaking work. But Alan knew she could have been so much further along if he hadn't derailed her. As he stood outside the auditorium, waiting for her to finish her presentation at a major psychology conference, the knot in his stomach tightened. What if she refused to listen to him? What if she hated him for what he had done? He wouldn't blame her. But even if she rejected his apology, he had to try. The doors swung open, and the attendees began to spill out, chatting animatedly about the presentations they had just seen. Alan scanned the crowd, his heart racing, until he spotted her. Sophia was standing near the exit, deep in conversation with a group of colleagues. She looked confident, poised, and every bit the professional he had known she would become. Taking a deep breath, Alan walked toward her. When Sophia saw him, her eyes widened in surprise. She hadn't seen him in years, and he could tell by the way her expression hardened that she hadn't forgotten what had happened. "Professor Turner," she said, her voice polite but cold. "I didn't expect to see you here." Alan swallowed, feeling his throat tighten. "Sophia, I came to see you. There's something I need to say. Something I should have said a long time ago." Her colleagues glanced at each other awkwardly before excusing themselves, leaving the two of them standing alone in the busy lobby. Sophia crossed her arms, her posture defensive. "What is it?" Alan's heart pounded in his chest, the weight of his guilt pressing down on him. "I failed you," he said, his voice low. "Not just as a professor, but as a person. I failed you on that thesis, and it wasn't because your work wasn't good enough. It was because of me, because I let my own personal feelings cloud my judgment." Sophia's eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening. "What are you talking about?" Alan took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly. "You reminded me of myself when I was your age, ambitious, driven, full of potential. But unlike you, I didn't achieve the success I wanted back then. I let my own insecurities get in the way, and when I saw how brilliant you were, I resented it. I took that out on you by failing your thesis. I nitpicked it unfairly. I sabotaged your grade. And in doing so, I sabotaged your career." The words hung in the air between them, and for a long moment, Sophia just stared at him, her expression a mixture of disbelief and anger. You did what? She said, her voice rising slightly. You failed me on purpose. Alan nodded, shame flooding his chest.
Yes.
I know it's unforgivable. And I know it cost you opportunities that you deserved. I've regretted it every day since. Sophia's face twisted with emotion, and she took a step back, shaking her head. I worked so hard on that thesis. I poured everything I had into it, and you failed me because of your own issues. Alan's heart broke at the pain in her voice. I'm so sorry, Sophia. I wish I could go back and undo it, but I can't. All I can do now is tell you the truth and try to make amends, however I can. I'll tell anyone, your colleagues, your mentors, that the failure was my fault, not yours. I'll do whatever it takes to help you rebuild what I took from you. Sophia looked away, her arms still crossed tightly over her chest. You think that's going to fix it? That telling people now is going to make up for the years I lost? Alan shook his head, his voice barely above a whisper.
No.
I know it won't fix what I did, but I owe it to you to try. You deserve the recognition you should have had all along, and if there's anything I can do to help you get that, I will. The silence between them was heavy, filled with the weight of the years that had passed since that betrayal. Sophia's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and Alan could see the battle raging inside her, whether to forgive or to walk away. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. Do you know how hard it was to rebuild after that? To pick up the pieces and keep going? I almost gave up, Alan. I almost quit because I thought I wasn't good enough. You did that to me. Alan's throat tightened, guilt overwhelming him. I know, he whispered. And I'm so sorry. Sophia let out a shaky breath, her hands trembling. I don't know if I can forgive you.
Not yet.
But I appreciate that you came to me, that you finally told the truth. Alan nodded, his chest aching. I'll be here if you ever want to talk, or if you need me to make things right publicly. Whatever you need, I'll do it. Sophia looked at him for a long moment, her expression softening just slightly. I don't need your help anymore, Alan. I've made it on my own, despite what you did. But maybe one day we can talk. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Alan standing alone in the lobby, his heart heavy with both guilt and a faint sense of relief. He had finally told the truth, finally faced the consequences of his actions. He had no idea if Sophia would ever forgive him. But for the first time in years, Alan felt like he had taken a step toward redemption, even if that redemption was far from guaranteed. The teacher's test had come too late, but at least now, he could begin to face the man he had been and strive to be better. And for now, that was enough.